One day you will be dead. Everyone you love will be dead. Everything you ever said, anything you ever did, will all be forgotten, will have no meaning, value, significance to anyone, anything. If there's some sort of aliens exist at that point in time, any form of consciousness, you will be of no significance to and not entirely unremembered. But on the bright side, you can play fantasy esports and alpha draft now while you still exist in some corporeal form, unless of course you live where you can't play alpha draft, in which case you are essentially already dead inside and just waiting for the ground to claim you. So the groups have been announced for the MLG Columbus Major, which is going to be taking place from the 29th of March to the 3rd of April, and it will be in, as the name suggests, Columbus, Ohio, in the United States of America, and the venue is the Nationwide Arena where the Columbus Blue Jackets play. And there's $1 million total prize purse, obviously increased from the $250K of past majors. Winner gets $500,000, where winners of the previous majors got $100,000. So everyone's been looking forward to this. We've had the qualifiers, we've had the minors, and now we know what the groups are. So the group stage format is 4 teams in each group. There are 4 groups. You play a little double elimination bracket inside the group. All the matches are best of 1 except the decider. Now, the decider is the match which the second and third place team play to decide who comes second, essentially, and gets out the group. So one team will win both their first games and go through after 2 best of 1s. One team will lose both best of 1s and go out of the tournament. 2 teams will be remaining. They will play a best of 3, and the winner of that match will join the first team in the playoffs, where 8 teams will make it to the playoffs of the 16 teams. And at that point, we'll have a proper best of 3 bracket, and everyone's seen the way that goes. Now, another factor to mention is that the map draw system has a random element where you ban out maps until there are 3 remaining, and then a randomizer, whatever the fuck that means, just picks one of the 3 at random that you have to play. Now, I hate that. I really don't like that. I think it's one of the worst aspects of the majors and Valve-sponsored tournaments, because it means that I've seen scenarios like happened at the minor where a team got the pick ban and they had a better map pool so that 2 of the 3 maps would be a big advantage for them, and the other team with the small map pool, who hadn't even done necessarily a great job pick banning and doing research, ended up locking out and getting the 3rd map that was a good map for them and either won or had a more of a chance than they would have done otherwise. So I don't like that system at all, because obviously in a ban scenario that would be able to get eliminated at that point in time, and it's just unlikely. So another thing I also don't like is the way these pools were drawn, because what they do is they take the past results and then the recent results of the qualifiers and they combine them to do the pools. So in past tournaments, what you did is any team who finished top 4 was in Pool A. Any team which finished 5th to 8th of the last major was in Pool B. And I forget for C and D if it was just random at that point in time. It might have been just a one pool overall at that point in time. But for this one, Pool C is the teams who finished in first place in their group at the qualifier, and Pool D, the last pool, are the people who came out second. Now, what I don't like about this system is, first of all, for the ones that qualified, it's not as bad, even though it's still not really as logical. I mean, you can't directly compare them like that. But what I don't like about the first 2 pools, Pool A and Pool B, the top 4 teams of the last major, Cluj-Napoca, and the 5th to 8th teams, is that it's been months and months since then. I mean, how long has it been since then? Like, what, at least 4 months? More, maybe, when we get to the actual major. So to use results from 4 months ago as the primary way to rank someone for this major doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And we've seen certain teams drop off massively. And obviously one team who came top 4 at the last major was NIP, who have a different player, and at the moment aren't even ranked in my top 10 because they've done fuck all since then. So they're going to get one of the top seeds at this tournament. Also, they don't just rank the teams based on that. They then add in a random element there, so where they take the pool and they say, we're not going to rank teams within the pool. We're just going to make it, you're all the same. So essentially what they're saying is, in Pool A, first of all, by the way, Pool A has people like FaZe and NIP in because they came top 4 at the last major, even though right now everyone would be like, well, no, Fnatic's much better than all those teams. No, Fnatic don't get a top seed in this tournament. But anyway, Pool A says that Envious, Na'Vi, FaZe, and NIP are essentially just the same. We're just going to make it random as to who you get. So you can get FaZe or NIP, teams that you'd have a decent chance to beat, or you can go ahead and you can get Na'Vi. I mean, that's just reasonable, right? No, that's totally unreasonable. So I don't like that system. I think it's a terrible approach, and you could have ended up with some nightmare groups at this tournament because, for example, you could have actually ended up with a group that was Fnatic and Na'Vi, the number one and number two teams in the world, quite clearly, by the way, in the same group at the major. So that would obviously be utter bullshit. Now, that didn't happen, luckily. Overall, we haven't really gotten any super trouble groups. Of the top 10 that I rank, my current top 10, which I released on, I think, the 7th. Was it the 7th? It could have been the 7th, so Monday. 9 of my top 10 are represented here at the majors, so it's a pretty stacked major. The only one who didn't make it, and shockingly so, was Dignitas, who finished in 6th place because they failed to get out of the group where they played Renegades and Cloud9. Shocking that they actually didn't get out there. I really expected them to. They looked like they were on the rise. They were my number 6 team, so they're the only top 10 team not ranked. Everyone else is here. Now, based on my rankings, if we go through and we look at the groups, so Group A is NIP, top 4 at the last major, Luminosity, 5th to 8th at the last major before they made their roster moves, Mouse Sports in the group stage and then won their group at the qualifier, Flipside Tactics came out 2nd at their qualifier. That's Group A. Group B is FaZe, top 4 at the last major. By the way, Luminosity is number 3 in my rankings. So Group B, FaZe are number 9 in my rankings at the moment. They finished top 4 at the last major as G2, went back and they had Dennis. Fnatic are in this group. They are my number 1. They were top 5th to 8th at the last major. At the moment, the best team in the world. Splice were shocking first place qualifiers out of their group at the qualifier, actually replacing Mongols to even get into that position, but props to them, they managed to qualify. And then Team Liquid finished 2nd in their group in that famous game with Hellraisers, which was quite intense. And so that's Group B. Group C is Envious, who at the moment are my number 4, but were the winners of the last major, finished top 4 there. Australis are my number 5, and they finished 5th to 8th at the last major, famously getting upset by NIP in the quarterfinals. Gambit, who gives a fuck? Gambit won their group, amazingly, the one that had Dignitas, Renegades, Cloud9, they won this group at the qualifier. CLG are my number 7 ranked team, much to the chagrin of many, it appears, and they finished 2nd in the qualifier for this, where they were actually in the group that had Vexed and had Splicing, so quite shocking that they didn't come out in first in that group. Group D is Na'Vi, who are my number 2 ranked team, top 4 at the last major, actually made it to the final. Virtus.pro finished 5th to 8th, famously losing to G2. They are my number 8 ranked team. G2 Esports, formerly Titan, are my number 10 ranked team. They fell out in the group stage, had a very close game against NIP until they got wrecked halfway through that. And Cloud9 are the last team, and they came out in 2nd place at the qualifier. So, just looking at my rankings, first and foremost, before we break down the teams in a different manner, looking at my rankings alone, here's what the rankings would tell you about the 4 groups. So rankings would tell you Group A, which was the NIP, Luminosity, Mouse Sports, Flipside group, is by far the easiest group because the only top 10 ranked team there is Luminosity, who are very good, but there's 3 teams in this group who are not even ranked. Every other group has at least 2 top 10 ranked teams, and in the case of D and C, they have 3 top 10 ranked teams each. So Group A, the easiest group on paper according to my rankings. Group C is the hardest competition for first place because Group C is the one that has my number 4 team, Envious. Group C is Envious, Australis, Gambit, CLG. So Group C is the one that has Envious and Australis are my number 4 and number 5 teams. CLG are my number 7 team. So the rankings would say this is the hardest competition to get out in first place. Group D, which was Na'Vi, Virtus.pro, G2, and Cloud9. Group D is the one that my rankings would say has a tough battle for 2nd place because you've got Na'Vi way out in front, number 2 seed. Then you've got the number 8 and the number 10 seed, Virtus.pro and G2, potentially battling for 2nd place there. So that's the hardest one for 2nd place. And Group B, which is the one that is FaZe, Fnatic, Splice, and Team Liquid. Because Splice is number 1, in what universe would you ever hear that statement? I guess in a statement where a number 1 at being the shittest team in this group. There we go. So Fnatic is the number 1 team in the world and are the number 1 ranked on here. And FaZe is only number 9 and barely grasping on. And then the other teams, Team Look totally unproven still with this lineup. And Splice complete nobodies. As a result, this is the most clear-cut group. That's what the rankings will tell you here. Because the gap between 1 and 9 is so huge that Fnatic still should come out first and they should have no chance of not coming out. Now then, when we actually break down the groups team by team though, and I give you my impressions, so let's go to Group A. This is the one that's NIP, Luminosity, Mouse Sports, Flipside Tactics. So Luminosity comes in clear favourites to get out this group. It is almost certain they will get out this group. I'd say it's pretty certain actually, because they're in sick form. They've had 2 finals in a row now at DreamHack Leipzig and IEM Katowice. They've had 3 top 4s in a row because before those 2 tournaments, they made it to the top 4 at Star Ladder. And in all 3 of these tournaments, by the way, they lost to the eventual champion. So they're in incredible form right now. They're taking teams like Na'Vi and Fnatic, who are the 2 best teams in the world, to overtime on maps. They're a team who we know they want to play stuff like Train, Overpass, Inferno. Now, interestingly enough, Mouse Sports, who's in this group, doesn't really play any of those maps. So I already see Mouse Sports having a lot of trouble in terms of the pick ban and really having to pray for that randomizer to give them a chance. In terms of this group, this should be a clear one for Luminosity. If somehow they got upset in a best of 1, I mean, they did lose that game on Mirage to NIP at Katowice. If somehow they got upset, I mean, obviously Mouse Sports and NIP, in theory, in a best of 1, could win a best of 1 against Luminosity. They have NIP has done it. It doesn't seem as likely they'll do it. And obviously, Mouse Sports has an eco, and they have that factor where he could go off, and it could happen. So it's possible Luminosity might not go out at first. I think they still will go out at first. And if they don't go out at first, it's not a problem. There's a best of 3 waiting for them, and they will win a best of 3 against any of these teams. I have no concerns whatsoever in that respect. So Luminosity clear cut to get out in first. Now, in terms of who comes out in second, that's where it gets more interesting. I still would lean towards NIP to do it. Now, NIP, they got a map win off Luminosity. That's big boy shit at IEM or Mirage. It looks like Mirage at the moment is like the map they're really playing a lot, and it's one of their best maps at the moment. So that's quite interesting when you consider someone like Mouse Sports is going to be willing to play you on Mirage potentially. They haven't really been playing Dust 2. They play some Inferno. They played some Overpass. Now, Inferno, Overpass, that all puts you in the realm, and Mirage, by the way, to be playing Luminosity. Those are maps that Luminosity likes. So you're going to have issues beating Luminosity overall. And in terms of Mouse Sports, you haven't played Dust 2, which is a map that they play. Cobble's really going to be a factor there. It's going to be harder. One of the bigger challenges for NIP is obviously going to be how they do against Mouse Sports, not Flipside, because Flipside even plays some of the maps that they want to play. I think overall, NIP has a decent shot to get out of this group. I think they've massively locked out getting this group. This could have gone way worse for them. This group, remember, could have been like Fnatic. It could have been... Who else would be a tough one? Could have been Fnatic, it could have been CLG, it could have been G2. I mean, there's a lot of ways it could have gone. So I think NIP's locked out and they've got a decent chance to get out here. The main thing that can stop them getting out is Mouse Sports, but it's not really just Mouse Sports, is it? It's the Nico show. Now, Nico has been going fucking ham in Mouse Sports since he took over as the game leader. He was already doing very well before that, but somehow taking over as the game leader hasn't really affected his output. He's going ham. He is very sick at the moment. At the moment, he's in better form than any of the NIP players. So if he's the best player on the server when he plays against NIP, he can go off and he can win the best of 1 against NIP and potentially give his team a chance to get out the group. Now, obviously, asking him to win 2 best of 1s against Luminosity and NIP is probably not as reasonable. It could happen on some off chance, but I don't think it will overall. So he's probably going to end up playing NIP in the best of 3 decider. In that scenario, I'd say NIP should have the quality, despite the fact I'm not a big fan of Pith. I think NIP should have the quality and the experience and the good players to be able to win the best of 3 and be able to get out in that fashion. But obviously, Mouse can go up head-to-head with them. They play some of the same maps, but the map pool crossover isn't that huge. And I think that a lot of it will probably come down to how NIP plays on something like Cobble if they have to play that there. There's also the question of Nex. Now, can Nex be a factor? Because in nearly all the other majors he's played in, he hasn't been. He's actually been very underwhelming at the majors. I mean, he came into, I think it was ESL 1 Cologne when Mouse was in that really hot form and they were doing all these great top 4 finishes and he was looking really sick. He was looking like what Nico looks like now, although not quite as consistent. And then he just fell apart at the major. And ever since then, he's been very flaky on and off. So if Nex can show up along with Nico, who you're almost guaranteed will show up, now Mouse is cooking. Now Mouse could beat an NIP. Now Mouse could be dangerous to Luminosity. Otherwise, if it's just Nico, I see them having a chance to get out in second, but I don't think it'll happen overall. And I think they should be solid to beat Flipside. Flipside, I mean, the famous thing about Flipside is they're really good at qualifying for majors, and then they're no threat at the majors. It's going to be the same here. I mean, This is a team that should not be winning maps in this particular format, especially since there's a best of 3 as the decider. They're a team who want to play Overpass, Inferno, Cobble. So as a result, they're going to get maps that they want against all these opponents that they're in a group with. The maps aren't going to be a problem for a flip side. Problem is they don't have the fragging power in this group. And they have decent tactics, but don't have good enough tactics to go against Luminosity. So I see them losing out in every area. They don't have the fragging to go against Nip and Mouse, and they don't have the tactics to go against Luminosity. So they're too much a much of nothing in that sense, and I think they're an obvious pick to come out last in the group. Now, Group B is the one that is FaZe, Fnatic, Splice, Team Liquid. So Fnatic, they are the best team in the world. They have won 6 events in a row. They have won the 3 events that they've played in 2016. Their only 2 weak maps are Train and Mirage. Train because they only have a 42% win rate on it. Mirage because they lost the last 4. But the thing is, they ban Mirage pretty much every time, and the second most banned map for them is Train. So in this sort of a format, they're just going to get those maps the fuck out of there. On the other 5 maps, they have a 70% plus win rate. And on 3 maps, Dust 2, Inferno, and Cash, they have an 80% plus win rate. They are fucking unreal right now, and their raw skill is just rolling over teams. Nobody in this group is likely going to be able to match up, even in the best of 1, skill-wise with Fnatic. They have so much skill. They are just rolling around. Their form is insane. So you go to the team that skill-wise might have a chance is FaZe, because FaZe is known for having some decent skilled players and some aimers. Problem is, that's kind of died off a bit. That was around when they were in G2. That was when everyone was going off and everyone was going ham. Players like Rain really dialed it back a lot. Makaleli's never played at that crazy level he played in that Mouse Sports game at the last major. He's never played at that again on LAN since. FaZe feel like they've dropped off a lot in terms of skill, and that was the main area where they had to come in and try and beat this team here. They had standard tactics before, and that's not going to get it done against Fnatic, I don't think. Now, their Inferno is decent, so they could play with Fnatic on a map like that. They did beat Luminosity on it. But they also can get smashed by Australis on the same map at IEM. So, I mean, does it really matter? They haven't been playing the customs, which I could see really costing them if they go against some of these other teams who do play the customs, particularly Fnatic, obviously, Team Liquid to a degree. So, I think FaZe, overall, considering they're a top seed, they've got a decent group here to potentially get out. But Fnatic's clearly getting out in first. Whether FaZe can come out in second comes down to the Team Liquid question. Now, for Team Liquid, they have Simple. Now, if Simple plays to the level he can play at, and obviously he hasn't done that for a while, he can be the best player in the game when he plays against FaZe. He could be the best player on both teams, and as a result, they can have a very good chance to beat them. If it's in a best of 3, that's where it's more difficult. Team Liquid hasn't won many best of 3s against European teams. Team Liquid hasn't got much experience of that. Team Liquid is, if you play against FaZe and give them a lot of options, potentially 3 maps, it feels like they'll probably get you in the end. They've got the more confident players, they've got the players who aren't going to crumble on LAN, they've got the players with some more experience, they've got a good mix of roles. Team Liquid's still figuring things out. They don't even have their real lineup because they brought Kuster in, and obviously he can't play at this, so they've got a Dren instead, and he's back in, and is he going to be shot calling? Are they going to be mixing it up again? Because in the last map, the Dust 2 game, they were actually mixing it up between different players as to who did the in-game leading. So in-game leader issues here, it's not going to be as much of an issue against FaZe. Is going to be mainly about hitting your shots, but for me, the guy who really has to be here isn't just Simple. That's a must that he must be there for them to have any chance to get out of the group. The guy who has to turn up for me is Nitro. If Nitro can turn up in the way that he didn't early on in that qualifier, then they have a chance to go head-to-head with a team like FaZe. Overall, I'd still edge it to FaZe. I think FaZe is probably going to come out second. Team Liquid's going to have their shot there because of the best of 3. Splice, I think, has a 0 chance to get out of this group. They shouldn't even have been in the qualifier. They shouldn't even be here to some degree. I mean, obviously they should. They won the game, so fair play. But they shouldn't in as much as if I play those games out 100 times, I don't think they turn out that way. If teams knew about them, I don't think it turns out that way. If teams get a different format than best of 1s, I don't think it turns out that way. There's all these ways you can spin it, but whatever, they're here, and that's all that matters because they're going to be going out in the group stage. They're going to be in big trouble, not least because every team in the group has a lot of skill and a number of proven players. They're not really any rookies to go against here. They played Cash and Mirage at the qualifier. Now, Fnatic's going to ban Cash Mirage anyway. You don't want to play Fnatic on Cash. FaZe always liked a bit of Cash going far back. Team Liquid, I mean, I don't see where Splice is going to get wins here. I think they're the most obvious team to pick to come last place at this major. Now, Group C is Envious, Australis, Gambit, and CLG. Now, Envious have the new player, Devil, so that's a massive question mark right there. What the fuck is that going to do to their lineup? The upside is Doesn't that much matter if he does not very well, because Kia was doing fairly badly for the last like 3 or 4 months. And even when they were winning, like when they were doing those great results in the first 6 lands they had together, I don't think he was particularly impressive. He had the odd round here and there. So he wasn't contributing much. So I don't think there's as much pressure on Devil's Shoulders, though it is a fucking major. And he hasn't played anywhere close to that sort of a level on LAN. Now, also, Envious is locked out in this group in as much as they've got Australis there. And Australis has always been a good matchup for this particular team. So there's no reason that should end now, although obviously there's a different player involved, so maybe their lineups are slightly different. But they've always had a good history against Australis, so that gives them a chance to get out in first place here. Even though I still favour Australis to, actually. Now, also of note, perhaps interesting to some people that they won't know this, is that Happy has a streak of making the playoffs of every single major in CSGO. So if they were somehow to get shockingly eliminated here, that streak would end. I don't think it's going to end. I think they're pretty much certain to get out. I also think the overall group is a good matchup for them in terms of the teams they're going to play, because Gambit want to scrap and will force buy and will buy AWPs all over the place and economically limit themselves. So great, Envy's at home there. They're not going to have as much pressure on them. CLG historically has been a good matchup for a team like Envious, ironically, considering obviously the precursors of these teams were the ones where CLG who beat LDLC in that Dust 2 game at MLG Aspen for their first big LAN with that lineup. Now, I think Envious is definitely getting out of the group. The question is whether it's first or second. History says they should be able to beat Australis. I think the new lineup probably will lose to them. Now, Australis, here's the key thing about Australis. Australis is definitely getting out of this group. Australis does not lose to Scrubs. I know people like to bag on them. Yeah, they do lose to all the top teams. They've in this year, look at the teams they have map losses to. They have map losses to Luminosity, one of the best teams in the world, fantastic form at the moment. G2, okay, admittedly, that's a bit of a surprise, but actually G2 has been kind of underwhelming in terms of the names, yes, and underwhelming in terms of what their future is going to be. But in terms of their actual performances, they've been overperforming. They're pretty solid right now, actually. They're not a bad little gatekeeper team at the bottom of the top 10. It's okay, surprising they've lost maps to them. Envious, who at one point in time were the best team in the world and are still a very skilled team, and Fnatic are the best team in the world by far. Those are the only 4 teams to take maps off Australis in 2016. They've played 8 other teams, and none of those 8 other teams have been able to take a map off them. So Australis do not lose to Scrubs. So as a result, Gambit, CLG, kiss yourselves goodbye because you're not beating Australis. Now, the question for Australis is what happens when they play Envious. I think they're probably going to beat Envious. I think as a result, Australis is getting out in first place, and that's all there is to it. They're a fantastic skilled team still. They've got a lot of flaws when it comes to the top teams, and they choke in big scenarios. This is a group stage. These are some lesser opposition, and even Envious has a little bit of... They're kind of weakened. There's blood in the water there. So I think Australis is getting out of this group in first, and I think it's pretty clear Envious should get out in second. But CLG is here. Now, if CLG comes along and JDM plays solidly and consistently, like he did all the way up to where the major qualifier came along, where he played terribly, then they can at least be decent against a team like Envious in the best of 1 format. In the best of 3 part, it's still going to be hard to get a win there, especially because where are you going to get maps? They've previously only been getting wins on Overpass because Envious gave it to them. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. And so I look at the maps that Envious is going to play, and I think that CLG is going to be in trouble if they have to play a team like Envious. And I think Australis, as we know historically, wrecks them completely and will do so here. If it's not JDM, and he has to turn up for them rather chance, he's the best player in the team, Tarek has to show up now. I've watched a lot of the majors. Aside from like 1 map, I haven't seen a whole lot from Tarek. He hasn't really done it for me. So he has to turn up as well, and then they have 2 people who are solid. Now, Cutler has been in much improved form. He can be a solid guy for them. But his kind of a solid game is like a Crims-esque style game in terms of an NA player. So he's not going to take over the whole game, 1v9 it, and win you a map against Australis or Envious. So you can see it's very much on the shoulders of JDM and Tarek this tournament. If they can get it to Dust 2, which is a map this team plays a lot, okay, they have some chances. Problem is that's not going to happen with Envious. Australis are probably still better than you on Dust 2, even though Australis have lost a lot on Dust 2. Overall, I don't see it happening for CLG at this tournament. I think this is going to be another group stage elimination. Last team is Gambit. Now, Gambit, I'm actually surprised they made it out of that group. They were my pick to come last place. I look at this team and I say, I don't know what chance they've got, because I think this is a real mixed team. Like, on one hand, Mo, his name's spelled M-O-U with a 0. I think he's a good player, actually. I think he's not a star, but I think he's a solid player, and he puts up good performances, and when he gets his AWP, he really can get good fragging numbers. He can drop 30. He can go well against a number of other good players. He's a good player. Adren was fragging unusually well at the qualifier. I don't expect that to continue, even though he is a guy who had a history of being a big fragger in 1.6. It wasn't so much earlier in CSGO when he was in those Virtus.pro lineups. And he has always been a solid player on LAN. But all in all, I think that's one of the issues for this Gambit team. It really relies on Mo and Dosia a lot in terms of fragging. And we know Dosia's time's been and gone. He's still a good player, but he's never been that massive high-impact player. And I feel like teams have learned how to adapt and how to play with him. And also, his just slow way of moving around the map hasn't really fit to the newer meta, I don't think. So, they've got decent skill. They can certainly go ahead to teams like CLG. Maybe they could get an edge on Envious if Envious turn up in bad form. Still seems pretty unlikely, though. They have a very limited style of play, and since the maps they like are Cash, Train, I don't really know when I look at this group where they're going to be able to get wins. Like, I feel like teams like Australis are going to just wreck them in terms of map pool. Envious, I mean, you don't really want to play most of those maps against Envious. You can maybe play something like Train if it could get there, but it probably won't. Envious will just ban off that, so it's going to be hard to get a good map against Envious. And against CLG, sure, that could work out. I think that might even be a decent matchup, but who cares? You're not going to be playing and getting out in second. So that group's pretty obvious to me, Australis, Envious. And the last group, Group D, is Na'Vi, Virtus.pro, G2, Cloud9. Na'Vi are incredible. Despite what happened to IEM, they're still one of the best teams in the world. They're a very special team right now. I love watching them play. They've got every aspect. They've got super deep map pool. They've got some of the best players in the world. They play both sides of the map well. They can play a full buy. They can play a force buy. This is just a great team to watch right now. Absolutely fantastic Counter-Strike. Guardian had an off IEM, but I heard some rumblings that he had some sort of health issues that he didn't bring up. That would make sense because he had been one of the best players in the world, like one of the top 2 or 3 in the whole world over the last 4 or 5 months. So it was unusual to see him do so badly. And even so, they still got to a scenario where they could have been playing in the final. Flamey has had a sick run of form. He's been very good. Aside from Starladder, this guy's been absolutely cooking with gas. He's been really, really good. And that's what didn't used to happen that often in 2015. So now that is happening often now. If Guardian shows up in decent form, especially in the kind of form he showed at the last major, and Flamey's here in the form we're seeing him at the moment, like every 3 out of 4 events, they're going to do serious fucking work. And Na'Vi is going to be a contender for this major. So I think Na'Vi is clear cut to get out of this group. They're already fantastic, and this group is so weak. They should be getting out in first place. And getting out of the group overall, 100%. That's a certainty to me. They have such a sick map pool. They're not even going to be bothered by the randometer aspect. They've just got the matchup to beat everyone in this group. Now, Virtus.pro, first of all, interestingly enough, that they would get Na'Vi as their top seed because Virtus.pro has a classic matchup against Na'Vi that tends to see Virtus.pro coming out on the better end of that. And they've historically won many, many times against Na'Vi in CSGO. Now, Virtus.pro's best maps, Cobble, Train, Inferno. Now, Cobble and Train, Na'Vi, I'd love to see you on those maps. So you're even going to see some of these maps in there. The problem for Virtus.pro is they are a fucking mess. They've lost tons of games online and on LAN recently, even though they got to the top 6 at IEM. They're a team where, that was mainly, by the way, because they're in a very weak group. They're a team where I look at them and I see a map pool that is all over the place. It is a complete mess. They've lost tons on every map. They haven't even got like one map that stands out and is still sick. Like even their train's really fallen off despite being like one of their best maps. Historically, there's shambles in terms of the win rates. They're in the worst form we've ever seen them coming into a major. They have to ban Dust 2 as they always did, but now they have to try and ban Inferno sometimes because they're having problems there. But despite all of that, good news Virtus.pro fans. They've got a good group. This is a good group for them. Na'Vi is the team much better than them who should beat them, yet they have a decent historical matchup against them. Interesting little tidbit to look at there. And G2 is a team that they should be able to overpower and have beaten many times. And Cloud9 is a team that historically is a great team for them to go against, and they can outskill, even with some of the issues they're having right now. And forget the tactics, they're going to run over with Cloud9. So I think this is still a good group for VP to potentially get out in second here. Or if there was some miracle win, get out in first if they beat Na'Vi. Now G2 is going to be more of an issue for them. That's the team we've got to look at now. These are the ragtag group of vets where it's like they're not bad enough that they should retire or be kicked out, but they're also not good enough that they're like phenomenal and no one's really like contending for best player in the world at his position or role, but they're just a solid team. They've got a lot of experience playing with each other collectively, and they do have solid strats. They have one of the better tactical approaches, and in a group like this, against Na'Vi, it's not going to help them. They're going to have no chance there. But against Virtus.pro, they've certainly got a good approach because of that. And against C9, I think they win in both respects, skill and strats. So they do still have the Shocks factor. Shocks is a still... he's not really one of the best players in the world, but he still has those maps where he'll do that, where he'll have like a 30 frag performance, where he has like 120 ADR, and you're like, wow, that's the old Shocks. So the Shocks factor in a group like this, where VP's weakened, and C9's especially in vulnerable right now, the Shocks factor can be huge and can win them those games single-handedly. Existence has improved his fragging, but interestingly has a history of failing at the majors beyond his first one, has never made it out of the groups after that. He had a massive breakdown himself, going like 1-17 on Dust 2 against NIP at the last major, and his whole team went to shit on Cash and then Dust 2 after having a big lead on Cash. So he's got some kind of mental demons to go on there, but a decent group to have a chance to get out of in this sense. I think overall they've got a good shot here, mainly due to the best of 3 decider and mainly due to Virtus.pro's presence. Now for Cloud9, the last team, I think they're dead in the water here when you look at the other teams. Even if they get an upset here, the other teams can all still beat them. Shroud has had to hard carry them to this point to have any chance. I don't know that that's going to happen because at majors and in more international competition, Shroud doesn't carry as hard. That's just been a fact, except against Fnatic, it feels like. Stewie2K is still problematic in terms of not fitting in the lineup, and I feel like he's going to get exposed here in terms of the teams he's playing, because look at the number of fucking veterans. Na'Vi, Virtus.pro, G2. These are some of the most experienced players in all of Counter-Strike in these 3 teams. These guys aren't going to fuck up in a way that lets Stewie2K go on a rampage and go off. This team's got bad strats, they've got bad in-game leading, they've got bad team play at the moment, they don't have good T-sides, and overall the skill hasn't been there. Skadoodle's been very off, Freakazoid's been having terrible performances. They look shaky even against Renegades at that qualifier. So I think they're dead in the water here. I think they've got no chance to get out of the group, and I don't even think they're going to win a game here. So I think they're going to come in last place. So those are the obvious comments. Unlike everyone else, where every major, everyone's like, this is the most stacked, sick major ever. I actually don't think this is the most stacked major ever. Like I said, Dignitas isn't here, and that would have been a team I'd definitely like to see here. We didn't have Hellraisers here. That would have been quite fun in terms of what they'd been doing recently. Obviously, we had no chance to have someone like Tyloo here because they couldn't go to IEM Taipei because of the cheating and they couldn't get in through. There's all sorts of issues. Mongols didn't end up really mattering, but we didn't have a chance to see them potentially qualify. Yeah, there's all sorts of issues here as to where I could tweak it a little bit and make it a little bit better. I think it's still going to be a very good tournament though. It will still be maybe the best tournament of the year so far, and these groups are all pretty interesting actually. There's none that are like super stacked and it's unfair. There's none that are super easy and it's unfair. Like even Nips, they've got a very good chance to get through, but also all the teams on paper to some degree could beat them. So it's not totally as bad as it might seem. Anyway, those are my initial thoughts. Alpha Draft Sun.